Hey, hey, what's up, homeroomies?
Hello.
Let me check real quick and make sure we're not flipped in some weird way. I think we're probably, yes.
We've got lots of rain here today. I don't know what you guys are facing.
Yeah, kind of a miserable day.
Rain in Kentucky.
So, second, let me grab this. All right, cool. Our Q&A. Let me get this. Oh, okay. Let's see if I can jump us in here. Never figure out how to get into that actual live stream. All right. Is that it? There it is. Sweet.
All right.
Sweet. What else we got going on today? It's been a crazy day.
Yeah, I was still helping my mom with her move here.
You almost died, like...
I almost died helping our son carry a rather large piece of furniture down the stairs. But I didn't. And I didn't dislocate my elbow, which I felt like I was going to.
Yeah. So huge challenge that April's been working on is she's been helping her mom. How many months have you've been going over there?
We've been working for probably like 5 months.
So almost every Friday.
Mm-hmm. Just like slowly decluttering, sorting, giving things away, throwing lots of things away. And now we're down to the last little bit where there's going to be an auctioneer that comes in. It's this amazing company that does this for people who are trying to downsize, where you just have this, like, you get to a point where you're like, everything with meaning is gone. This big furniture is not going to fit in my small new apartment or whatever. And this company just comes in and auctions everything off. And
yeah.
So
clears house.
Yeah, and it's great for when you have really odd things like a 1960 Massey Ferguson tractor, things like that.
Yeah, I don't know how to use that.
Right. It's still in working order. Someone will know how to use it though. So
yeah, April's dad loved that kind of stuff. So
and used that kind of stuff.
So after he died, just the process of like sifting all the family stuff has been a huge project.
Yeah.
And now our mom's moved in with us full time, so.
Yeah. And our son graduated yesterday.
Yeah.
From high school, so that's another big. We have 2 graduates now.
Yeah, big changes. What's up, Nikki?
Hey.
All right, guys. So I'm going to cruise through some of the questions you guys asked, and just want to say too, this month's theme, we know is kind of general. It's just about challenges that you might have, and challenges is a real general topic. Sometimes there are topics we have, like next month's topic is going to be a lot more, I guess, narrow, specific, where we can talk about specific rhythms. But sometimes we want to have these general topics so we can cover whatever it is you guys are wrestling through at the time and talk about all that stuff. So yeah, this is going to be a little bit of a all over the place in terms of topics. But we really want to have these conversations with you guys in the homeroom and just figure out how to help each other. So it's a big deal. First question was for Tammy. She said, my husband is not a team player. He's an exceptional employee, but his biggest and most consistent criticism from his bosses has been his lack of team skills, and it shows at home too. My son, 5 years, is picking up these behaviors. How can I encourage and build my husband's team skills up for our family and his job? What if he's unwilling to be a team? And the last thing you said there, I think that's the real, there's really 2 totally different topics. One is skill, and the other is the willingness or the decision to say, I like team, I want to learn how to be team. On the first one, I can relate a lot to, I think, guys who just find that they're very productive as an individual and they tend to get bogged down. And that can over time cause you to feel like I prefer individual environments more. And I have certainly had that experience and felt that way. I think what I have learned, I guess, over the years about team is that the level of the kind of meaning that leading a team can produce is so intense compared to what you can accomplish as an individual, and compared to what you can experience as an individual. That's why team sports are a lot more popular to watch, and people just get obsessive about them. There's a beauty to them, and it's not that individual accomplishments are not also really valuable, but there are just certain areas of life where you function as an individual, and certain areas of life where you function as a team. And if you tend to really excel in the areas where you function as an individual, and you've got, all those muscles built up, then you're going to struggle with leading and being a part of the family. And so that's just like, for me, that was that was definitely a struggle I had. And, one of the things I did to try to increase my skills is to actually try to put myself in situations that I was forced to act like a team. One of those was we decided for 3 years in a row to serve at a camp for 3 weeks where I was leading 20 teens, 20 teenagers as a team, constantly directing them. And I did it because I was not good at it. Like I enjoyed one aspect of it. There was a teaching aspect of it that was really, really intuitive for me. But probably 60-70% of it was directing and really the group as a team. And I just saw that was something I needed to work on. So, volunteering to coach, just putting yourself in a situation where you have to lead a team and where people are graciously allowing you to work in an area of weakness. I think for a lot of men, we like to be experts. We like to a lot of times feel like we're really competent. And so what that can create over time is you can begin to accumulate major strengths and then major weaknesses. And in the workplace, you can be rewarded for just being strong and just working all day long in your area of strength. But if you have a position that you hold where an area of your weakness is going to stop you, then you need to work on that area of weakness. And in the family, that there are areas where it needs to be like a team, and it's just going to function better. It's going to make a lot more sense. It's going to be a lot more enjoyable. And I think that you have to choose to want to create a team, and then you have to begin to put yourself in situations where you have to hone that skill. But I don't know if you have other...
Yeah, well, on the flip side of being the teammate of someone who maybe isn't as skilled at being a team member or whatever, or leading, maybe you have a husband that has a hard time leading, or any of these things where they have weaknesses, but within the family they need to kind of step up to these roles. It's very, very important for you as the wife to be super sensitive to letting him, watching where he's at, trying really hard to be aware of when he's trying, and maybe he's trying and he's not doing so great, or he tried to lead and the thing didn't go so well, or whatever. But being really sensitive to how to handle that, to encourage him where there might have been a little bit of success, to point that out and to dwell on that, and to not dwell on the part that didn't go so well. And then when he seems like maybe he might want to talk about the way to improve things, then jumping in then, and that kind of thing, where it's not where you're just being sensitive to the fact that this has not come naturally to him, and you want to be supportive and not critical.
Yeah, April was awesome with that. I feel like especially if she knew I was trying.
I had to grow in that though.
But once I feel like you saw, he's trying to lean into a weakness.
Yeah.
Like your sensitivity went way up.
Yeah.
That was super helpful, because again, if you feel really embarrassed by working in an area of weakness, then you're not going to do that. And that's where a lot of guys just struggle in the home, I think, is if there's an area or lots of areas in the home, they just feel like, I don't feel good at this, but when I go to work, I feel really competent and respected. Then that sort of difference between work and the home can get really toxic for a guy really fast. And I think that his wife can really make up a lot of ground by being encouraging.
Yeah, and making your team something that he wants to be a part of. If he, to whatever degree that you can. So if he's oh, my nagging wife and my, annoying kids or whatever, I don't know if I want to be a part of that team, or I don't want to lead that, or trying to, make it to whatever power you have in that, to be a team that he wants to be a part of.
Yeah, we have to help each other with that one for sure. That's a good question, Tammy. So Helen, she writes, our challenge this month is a family hardship where my husband has switched to a 6-day shift at work plus extra hours in night classes. When he goes to work in the morning, the kids are still asleep, and when he comes home, they're also asleep. I've tried adjusting their sleep schedules a little bit so the girls could see their daddy in the evenings for our bedtime routine, but there's only a few minutes each day. What we've managed to do so far is just strengthen our married team by meditating and praying after the kids' bedtimes every night. Well, not every night. For this season, any tips on how to stay focused as a family team when our coach is away most of the time? He's totally on board, but just really tired, and down the road he will be burned out. Also, how do you prevent burnout when our coach is out working and studying more than 70 hours a week? Is that even possible? So that's a huge challenge, Helen. Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind, I mean, one thing you mentioned is like this is a season. I don't know how long it is. That's a big deal. When you know you're doing something unsustainable, it's okay for the family to take on unsustainable challenges. They just have to know that they have the runway to complete the challenge, and the runway in every area, right? That your husband doesn't burn out, that your kids don't flame out, like that this is really a worthwhile investment of this season of our life. And you guys have made that decision, you've made that calculation, and so it's a matter of like enduring to the end, and that's really, really challenging. And so I think what I always think about in these areas is you've got to get really creative. You can't, you have to think about the end, the sort of the finish line, know where it is. Is it like 6 months out? Is it a year and a half out? Like, where's that finish line? And then what are we going to, like, what is our sort of sustaining plan? Like, and if there's nothing more you can do, it's like, hey, they're asleep. We have to take advantage of the day that he's off. How do we maximize that? So there's lots of those kinds of things. I mean, I know that for me, I mean, this might be weird, but when I would go in these seasons, sometimes I would literally get one of my kids up like at 11 o'clock at night, and it would be like they'd be super loopy, and I would just play with them for like half an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, I did that with Kelsey. I remember because I had a similar season where I was in school full time and working full time when I had two little kids, and so I definitely just was, I don't know. I mean, our kids fell asleep really easy, so I'm sure that it's not for everybody, but I definitely wanted to be with them. And then just finding ways, like, man, I know that they were pretty portable at that stage, so it was sort of like you would come and visit me a lot with the kids, and so I would get to see them during the day, or even in between studying times. But what are some other things we tried?
Yeah, that is a tough season, just to speak to the season perspective of it. I think whenever we've kind of counted the costs and chosen to enter into a season that we knew would be hard, I've been able to kind of calculate it and say, okay, I can do it for this long, or this is our projection as to how long this is going to last. But yeah, like Jeremy said, I think a lot of times I would take the kids to him, like we would try to meet him for lunch sometimes. The season for us didn't last super long. It was just a couple years or less, maybe a year and a half or something. And I tried to just join in on anything that I could, that, wait for him after his class, and then like try to, show up with dinner so that he could eat that in between classes, that kind of thing. So I don't know if there's any creative, you have to get really creative in these seasons and these times, and having the kids draw pictures for daddy during the day, and so they have something to like give him when they see him at night, but they're proactively thinking about him through the day. If there's any way he could reciprocate that to let them know that he's thinking about them, a quick FaceTime call at lunch, or I don't know exactly what the circumstances are, but if there's some way
recording like little video messages.
Yeah, little video messages, things like that. I think you just have to get creative in order to sustain during those times. And
sometimes, I don't know if you guys have extended family that can help. Man, that can really, I know that we relied a lot on that too during these crazy unsustainable seasons that we knew we just had to like endure and get to the end and then like recover. I think another thing to be wary of is when you're in an unsustainable season like this, that you don't develop habits around this season, that you don't develop that expectation. I know some guys do this where they work and then they go to school and then they graduate from school and then they sort of enter their work life and they just are gone all the time again. And it's like, wait a minute, was that season, or they just developed so many habits and they create that expectation. It needs to be much more like, no, it's a marathon, but once we cross the finish line, we're going to design our lifestyle totally differently so that we're integrated as a team.
And I think that you can count the cost before you dive into a season, but then I think you also start to realize things as you go. And you're like, oh, this is something that we're sacrificing. And I'm just now realizing I didn't know it would cost this thing or this whatever. Is this still worth it? You know, like my sanity for one, or whatever it is. Like I thought I could handle it, but I can't, or whatever the thing is. So being able to kind of revisit those conversations.
One thing too that a lot of people don't count as the cost, a lot of dads don't count the cost, is that in a season like this, you're really developing your work identity and your professional or educational identity. And then maybe, like you said, you've got some time for your marriage. But a lot of time your fathering identity is really suffering. A lot of guys don't realize what that does to them. And when your fathering identity is not being, and this is why I would wake up my kids and like play with them in the middle of the night. It wasn't necessarily for them. I mean, part of it was just for me. I needed to be a dad enough hours of the week to build up that identity. Because again, what happens is there's a subtle decision about who you are that can really, really wreak havoc on the family 5, 10, 20 years later, which is like, I am this professional, right? I've sacrificed so much. Yeah. We've sacrificed so much. We've invested so much money. And this is what I went after. And our culture will all day long say, yeah, that's great that's who you are. You know, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, you're going to be that. And that's not who you are. You've got many other identities that are important, and you have to decide which ones do you want to see strengthened over time. So that's why even grabbing these snatches of time throughout the weeks months where this is hard, can just experience being a dad, like really enjoy your kids during that day off if you have that, or other creative times, and just monitor what's going on in your own heart and your own identity, that you're building that part up. Another way to do that is when you're at work and when you're studying, think that you're doing this for your family. Don't think like, I'm doing this for me. This is me time. This is me becoming X, Y, or Z. That's part of what really can tweak your identity. But you can actually strengthen your fatherhood identity by saying, no, when I go to work, I'm providing for my family. I'm a member of the team. The team has sent me out to work. Or when I'm at school, I'm building up a skill for the future of our family. Like, this is why I'm doing this. I'm doing it for my kids, having pictures of your kids and your wife. Like, just really not separating from them emotionally, especially at the identity level. That's super important.
Yeah.
All right. Christina, boundaries with in-laws and extended family. So this is a really quick question. Like
that was her question.
Explanation point. So there's obviously, Christina, a huge spectrum here, from things that maybe extended family is doing that's annoying, all the way to like toxic to abusive. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we, so there's sort of obvious stuff that you need boundaries if it's really negative, if there's stuff that's really toxic. What most people deal with, since your question is so short, it's hard for us to know exactly what you're wrestling with, but I think what most people wrestle with is that they are just experiencing things that aren't super, like, it's like, why are we doing this? This doesn't feel healthy. This doesn't feel like relationally positive. A lot, that's probably where a lot of this lives. And so I think one way that I think that family teams can do a much better job of leaning into these relationships and trying to make them healthy is to lead instead of follow. So if you think about these extended family members, and again, I don't know if there's stuff going on that could be really on the more seriously toxic side, but if it's just hard to be together and for it to be positive, then I really think a lot of times we expect, especially these extended family relationships, to just sort of like by default, like we just get together for Thanksgiving, or we don't really think about what to do during these times. Like, should we be playing a game? Should we be having a conversation? Should we not be having a conversation? Like what does it, so, and this is part of when, if you're going over to their house, oftentimes you can't lead. It's like their house. So sometimes what I like to see with a lot of family teams that want to have really positive extended family relationships in the future is that you want to make your own house more of the hub, and then you want to lead in and start to like cast a vision for the time. How do we spend the time? In our family, like, it's a really big deal that we spend time studying the Bible together, or like my dad, he loves to play games with our kids. We just start to lead in those ways and say, okay, here's something that we know is really positive. We want to like really double down in this area.
Mm-hmm. I know that the phrase that I think of a lot in this is like inviting in. So what do you feel comfortable inviting your in-laws into? And maybe it's nothing, but maybe there's a little bit of something, inviting them to one of your kids' a kid event, or maybe you need to make something up, like we're gonna have this night where you come and tell us a story from the good old days, or something where you can somehow be with them and around them, but it's kind of on your turf, kind of on your territory, and you're doing the inviting and setting the tone. I think that can help. I know a lot of times when people ask these questions, they're dealing with there's just a whole spectrum, like Jeremy said. A lot of times they're dealing with parents who aren't believers, like parents who are smokers and they don't want their kids in their parents' house, or,
Yeah.
And then all the way to like abusive and very unhealthy. So there's a lot to consider in these situations. So maybe some people don't even want relationship with their in-laws. Some people, it's like, they're so annoying, I'm gonna have to like die to myself every time the in-laws come over. And maybe that's good. Maybe you need to die to yourself a little bit more. So there's kind of this in that middle of the spectrum. I think a lot of times we need to stop being, kind of picky and selfish, and let the grandparents be the grandparents in the way that makes sense to them, or whatever it is. And I don't know, I think sometimes there could be a history there of being, feeling taken advantage of, or whatever. There's just, with family relationships.
Sometimes we are more desiring to set boundaries because there's a bitterness in our hearts about something that happened in the past. And so it just depends on what that is, obviously. But for a lot of people, a lot of that bitterness is, it's really fueled by a sense of, my parents owed me all of this. We just culturally, we have a very kind of new bar for our parents that if you read the Bible, multiple places, like 1 Timothy 5, Paul writes that we're supposed to take care of the widows in our family and our parents because we owe them so much. And a lot of people walk around believing that their parents owe them, even though they sacrificed all the time, and they made all kinds of mistakes, like all of our parents did, and like all of us are doing. And so, but the way the Bible often talks about this is that we actually owe them, and it says in 1 Timothy 5 that we should repay them. And so that's just a different perspective than our culture generally has. I don't know if this applies at all in this situation, but that's just something.
And to think forward to how you want your kids to be with you, or what kind of mother-in-law you want to be, or the kind of relationship you would like to have in the future. Because it does not end at age 18. You need to parent for the long game, and allowing the generation above you to get involved. It's a lot of it's practice and everything for when you are the in-law, and how do you want to be treated, and let it build your sensitivity towards what your kids might be dealing with in the future. This
is a huge source of challenges too. Families, the extended family in particular, represents all the things that you can't control, and so it's an opportunity for us to really try to figure out how do you love for the long haul, and that's very hard for all of us to learn. Cool. And then Justine asks, what if there has been unhealthy behavior by your parents and they are not willing to grow? I think that's really in that first category, Justine, that I was talking about. It's a lot of it, that question, unhealthy behavior is it is a tough. This is a very tough thing to figure out. In general, I would say that it has to be something that you feel is doing active damage that you can't control before I would put up really strong boundaries. Everything before that, I would still lead. What I said earlier, like you want to lead, which is you want to decide what are those environments, how to make those as positive as possible, I don't think that I like to think about that as leading and not boundary setting. That to me, boundaries is a little more of a serious. I mean, I know that there's a lot of language around boundaries and barriers and those kinds of things, but it's really like trying to figure out what are those environments that are healthy, or the most healthy version, so that our kids can have some exposure to their grandparents.
And I do want to say that I don't know your situation specifically, so I don't want to be insensitive to this.
Yeah.
But I do feel like there are these possibilities of us needing to honor our parents, and the question is how do we honor them when they are like, what comes out of their mouth is this or that, or just, how do being around for 5 minutes takes me back to my childhood and like all these issues. And so I think it's another one of those situations where we have to get really creative and pray that God, ask the Lord to give us ideas about how on earth do I honor this person who is kind of like not really honor worthy, just because of the role they have as our parents. Yeah,
totally. It just seems saying, and that's a really hard situation you're describing. Your mom's making passive aggressive comments about your parenting in front of the kids.
Oh,
yeah, that's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that kind of thing can be really damaging. Limiting time, right. Inviting, but it's maybe once a month, or
yeah,
whatever the limit, how much ever you can handle.
Yeah.
Is.
Yeah, obviously, it sounds like you've already communicated, you've already talked about this, and so I would say that that's definitely a scenario where if it's doing damage like that, you want to lead. In other words, like decide the environments, decide the frequency, and make those decisions proactively so that it does as little damage as possible, but you can maintain that connection.
Mm-hmm.
But that's challenging, super hard. All right, Kenner says, I wonder how you would handle a scenario where a parent has brought to light they have an addiction. You work through it, yes, but do you tell the children? So yeah, this is, I think it really depends on how old your kids are. Obviously, like, would they understand, and is the addiction being lived out in front of them? I think one of the things that kids need to know is the impact of these addictions, and if they're old enough to know and they're old enough to see the impact, then drawing that connection in a appropriate way that honors the person and the fact that they're fighting this addiction and talking about it openly is something that I think is positive if you can pull that off. But if your kids are really little and they wouldn't understand anyway, then you have to say something that's much more age appropriate to them, right? Something probably much more general about it. But certainly, yeah, at our age where our kids are, which are older, they're teens, like we would have the very blunt conversation, like, hey, this is what's going on, guys. And part of it is to protect so that we can keep leaning in and supporting that person. Mm-hmm. Look, this is hard. They're in a hard struggle, and this is what it looks like. And, it's part of just sort of trying to be really transparent as a family and trying to approach these challenges as a team. But obviously with really small kids, it can be really difficult for them to understand it. But
yeah.
I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
No, I think I agree with that.
Okay. All right, Shani. Well, breakdown for us around discipline a lot. It's hard to describe, but where I'm when he wants discipline hard, I don't. We butt heads constantly. It's a huge issue for us that really puts a wrench in our marriage, sometimes for weeks. We have a hard time respecting each other. He doesn't respect me because I don't him, and vice versa. Perpetual cycle of conflict. And when we fight, we aren't close, and it triggers a slew of things. Decide on discipline. Who does the majority of it, wife or husband? Wife, do you submit to your husband's ideas on discipline? How does that work when dad works outside the home and mom is the main parent? Husbands, do you honor and trust your wife's judgment on discipline when she's... Well, the first thing, Shani, I would say is I think that there's sort of two different conversations around discipline. One is the philosophy of discipline, and the other is the tactics. I would level up, make sure you guys are first talking about what do you want? Like, what do you think a lot of times when we use the word discipline, it's like we immediately are talking about the tactics. Like, do you agree with spanking? Do you think this is too harsh? Or, okay, but it's like, what are we trying to accomplish? And the thing that like we were sort of really trying to be adamant about in our parenting is that the purpose of discipline is for training, not to necessarily sort of pronounce justice or judgment on the children. A lot of discipline naturally comes from a place of like wanting justice, right? Like, our kids just violated a rule, they must be punished, right? And I would just distinguish that from training. So in the gospel, we've all done things worthy of a just punishment. So justice is real, and our kids need to understand that that's part of, the thing that Jesus has come to save us from. But on this side of the cross, where we're forgiven, it's really important that that we use discipline for training. And we're trying to reinforce maybe particular things that we're trying to do to try to help our kids. So that's a little different than just justice. And so that's just an example of a conversation that kind of happens at a little bit higher level. Because if you can start to agree philosophically on why would we discipline, and then we get into the tactics, it gets a little bit cleaner, because then you can start to really talk about, okay, I don't really see this working with this child. Like, I don't think this is training, or that really causes oftentimes a dad to be really involved in the training process. Because one of the things you mentioned is you're the parent at home all day, and so that's where maybe a lot of discipline happens. But if you're actually doing proactive training, then your husband can be just as involved in that process, because you might decide when he gets home, there's going to be a period of training where he's going to like demonstrate a particular thing that you want the child to do, and then they're going to drill them, like take them through a process of doing it over and over again, in order for them to learn this skill, and in order for them to be trained. And so, and then they will then say, okay, now tomorrow with your mom, then this is the consequence, so that we can defend what we've trained you in. But that's one idea, and I think that's oftentimes the distinction for a lot of families, is trying to figure out like why discipline, and how to train, and just your other involved in the training process. And if it's a training process that is an actual process that he implements when he's home, then the fact that he's not home during the day doesn't necessarily mean that he can't train the kids, because that's just a part of what he does when he's at home. So that's one way he can get really involved. But
yeah, well, I mean, discipline stuff is super important, that topic. But the thing that's stuck out to me from your question, Shani, was a lot about like the respect thing, that cycle that can happen. We're very familiar with that. Maybe not around kids' discipline, but lots of other situations. And I feel like it's so important to have right order in the home, and there is biblical backing for right order in the home. And the husband is the leader, the wife is his helper, which is the Hebrew word that God uses, is the same word he uses to describe himself in the Psalms about how he is our helper. And so it's this very strong, powerful word, that is our role. And respecting our husband because he is in the role of husband, father, is what we're called to do. And I think I struggle with that when I feel like my husband is doing something or making a decision that I don't respect. Because I very much felt like I had to, I will give you my respect if you do something respectable. And I don't respect that, so I will therefore very loudly disrespect you and make sure everyone knows that I do not support this decision or the way you're doing that or whatever. And it just, the cycle that creates, I mean, I don't know if it's exactly the same for you, but it was very hard, and we found ourselves in a place of, not so great of a place, and having to come out of that. A lot of that for me was repenting. Like, yes, Jeremy had a lot of things he needed to work on and step up to and be more respectable about. But for me, as his wife, I really had to come to the place where I could repent to the Lord for trying to take over or for disrespecting my husband. And when I started to let the Lord change me in that area, these things that felt like so important, this like discipline thing feels so important in the moment, and I would get so upset. It really like the Lord would kind of put things in perspective for me. And I'm like, my kid's going to jail because he's 2 and my husband won't discipline, and all this kind of thing. And so the Lord just would kind of calm me down, help me put things in perspective, and just I had to keep trusting the Lord that, okay, you set this thing up in this way, and so I will respect your order, and I will respect him because that's the role you put him in. Help me play that out. And so I just want to encourage you with this, because it's intertwining in with the discipline and things like that where we and that is a whole ball of wax, respecting our husbands and all that. That's a whole ball of wax. Yeah. Very complicated in certain situations, different patterns and trends that we've allowed in, and things we need to overcome, things we need to repent from. All that stuff is a huge deal. But I do see how it could really make disciplining your kids hard when you're not agreeing from the big picture perspective. It makes you not agree on the tactical perspective. So I think some of the little things that we would train on would be even just like staying in your bed once they get to a toddler bed out of the crib. To eat what's on their plate, because we wanted them to be able to try different foods if we'd ever traveled somewhere, or sitting in your seat through the whole entire dinner time, because we wanted to be invited over to people's houses, and we wanted our kids to be, welcomed at other people's homes. And there's this quote that Jordan Peterson says that's something like, how does he say it? Like,
don't let your kids do anything that makes you dislike them.
Yeah, well, but then the other, train your kids so that other people will want to introduce them to the world. Right. And that just blew my mind, because I just think like, wow, like that is so, I want my adult friends to introduce my kids to the world, and that's like, whoa, it's kind of mind blowing to think about that. But so I would think that's kind of like a big picture, goal or thing to kind of like work towards. And it can start with little things like sitting down at the table while it's dinner time. Yeah. I mean, we had high chairs, maybe longer than you should, because I wanted my kids strapped in. So. Yeah.
Shani, you asked about, like, I think you were asking, I don't know if I got the question right, if they're yelling a lot. I don't know the age, but how you drill is the drills are always based on what you want them to do, and you have a reward, right? So if you're going to drill, and
it's not in the middle of the situation happening.
Your husband comes home, he's really happy, your kid's really happy, everybody's happy. He's like, all right, we're going to take about 10 minutes. We're going to learn how to use our inside voice. Okay, it's gonna be super fun. A 5-year-old, you could do a lot with a 5-year-old. Yeah. So you're gonna say, okay, let's play out a situation where you yell and scream, and then you can yell and scream, and say, okay, now we're gonna try that same situation again, but we're gonna use the art. And this can take time. Most people don't want to do this. They don't want to actually do training, because it
takes time.
Yeah, it just takes a lot of time and energy. But this is where a husband especially can engage when he's gone all day to do a training drill with their kid. And then reward them and like show them like, hey, that's what we want. Like, and if you do that while I'm gone tomorrow, then, when I come home, we'll have this reward. Or, so you're focusing all of your attention for like a week straight on one behavior, one element that you're trying to train them. If it's about yelling or about sitting still or whatever, but don't try to.
It's like when we potty train our kids, oftentimes we're giving them a little treat, a Cheerio or an M&M or whatever at the end. It's very similar to that idea. Like, I'm noticing that it's time that you need to learn how to go potty on the toilet. Therefore, we are going to train you. And now it's like, oh, I'm noticing that you scream all the time in the house. Okay, so instead of me just saying, be quiet, stop it, that's so annoying or whatever, we're going to, at a separate time when it's not happening in the middle of it, we're going to practice having indoor voices. And then you're going to get an M&M or a Cheerio or whatever. Marble system.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's our favorite, especially for a 5-year-old. They're usually ready for that.
Yeah.
I think Justina asked, I just saw a glimmer of her question, but I think, how do you present this if you're doing a lot of the research? I would really say that it's a big deal to have some time set aside for these philosophical conversations. And usually, like, a lot of times we talk about, date nights, which are like, not for these kind of conversations. Usually have fun, be romantic, be out together, like fall in love. You need to have like another time, which is sort of like we just
Like
call
a
it
business.
Yeah, we call it a family business meeting. So
Yeah.
that, and it sounds really weird, but it's like you need to have a time where you talk about the business of the family, or basically the hard parts. It could be your budgets, could be your parenting style, could be your discipline, and a lot of that is like you could say, hey, let's read these like 2 pages from this book, and let's have a conversation about our parenting or our discipline philosophy. I like us to kind of move in this direction, but I want to get your thoughts, and so I just think that's important to have time for that. But a lot of us don't take time for that. But that's, I think, a really important thing to do. Mm-hmm. Cool. That's a really good question. Jessica says, the idea of missing nutrients was a new concept for us. In your experience, are there a handful of missing nutrients that we as Western culture have as a whole? If so, could you discuss in more detail? I think one way to think about the missing nutrients, there's a continuum between fun and meaning. That's and it's sort of a spectrum. Oftentimes, that's where you might find a missing nutrient is like we're not having fun. Like the reason why we're yelling at each other all the time, we hate being a family. Like and it's not that we hate each other all the time. It's just like we're not ever having fun. We're always cleaning, or we're always disciplining, or blah blah blah. So that's a missing nutrient. Another one is meaning. Like we're having fun. We're just vegging out maybe in front of movies or whatever, but there's nothing meaningful happening in the home. That could be missing. There could be a missing nutrient. This is where we started doing very intentional one-on-ones. Oftentimes what we try to figure out is there a missing relational, like is a problem between 2 of the kids where they're not getting enough time, just listening to each other, hanging out, like understanding each other's hearts. Like our kids just got back from the 10-day sibling road trip, right? Because I think April was really sensing like there was a few of those relationships that were just not as strong as we wanted them to be, and so that was a missing nutrient. That like just have total fun together, go like enjoy it, and then you can get into spiritual stuff. Next month we're going to get into all kinds of spiritual things, but there's lots of, even in there I break down the nutrients, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Like April knows I'm obsessed with this idea, but like okay, we're talking about like the righteousness of the Father, but we're not really talking about this Holy Spirit, or we're really understanding Jesus and we're getting the Gospels. But so I try to think about like what are our kids really getting an experience, and is our family experiencing God? Are we only experiencing God as like the judgmental Father too much? Like we need just like one of the things I feel like our family needs a lot more of is just experience of the Holy Spirit. We're praying together, worshiping together, because we do a lot of Bible study together. But
those are missing nutrients.
Yeah, those are things that I'm like, how do we do that better? And so we're starting to initiate some rhythms around that stuff. But I don't know if you would say anything else about the nutrients.
I just think it seems like I keep saying this a lot today, but just to think creatively. I think in order to embrace the idea of having a family team, you're going to swim upstream against this culture, and it's so important to break out of what you see around you and come up with a creative solution. So there's just a lot of like you have to even asking the Lord, can you reveal to me what the missing nutrients are? Maybe it's not something obvious, but there's some kind of something that you can just sense. Moms, I think, can pick up on these things maybe sooner. I don't know, maybe not, but
yeah, I think usually the moms are the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
We're dying.
We need something. The oxygen's getting really low.
And most men, when their wives do this, they're like, shoot the canary. Like it's like we're kind of like,
whatever.
I think it's just your problem. And then when you shut your wife down, you discover actually 6 months later, she actually saw what was happening.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to figure out, like, don't shoot the canary. Like, just you need to like. Do you guys know that analogy? Do you know what that means?
I know what that means.
Okay, yeah. Back in the coal mine era, you'd put a canary, and then because you never could tell if the oxygen, the carbon dioxide, was starting to kill everybody, and then the canary would die. You're like, let's get out of here.
Canary's dead.
Yeah, so it's tough sometimes if the mom is the most sensitive one to the missing nutrients. Like, she might, there's something wrong here, and that can be really tough.
Yeah.
If the husband wants to shoot the messenger, so.
Yeah.
I'm very violent. I'm sorry, I'm watching too many...
These are violent analogies. War
movies. All right. Our biggest breakdown this is from Amy, that comes and goes, is keeping up on household cleanliness when both my husband and I are overworking. This is unfortunately something we cannot change. Sometimes as a teacher at a preschool, I have to cover absences, or we have events at the weekends that my husband is doing everything he can to get us out of debt. He's driving for Lyft on top of 40-hour a week night shift job. Wow. Good job, dude. I know that's tough to do 2 jobs at once like that. Plus, we have an almost 2-year-old. So to say we are exhausted at times is an understatement. So how do you try to keep up with home cleanliness when there is little to no time and energy in these days? Yeah, that's
hard.
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is, when you're in a really hard season, like we were talking about earlier, I think that you be really disciplined about the small habits, right? I think sometimes when you're overworked, you're even less disciplined, like you just leave the plate out or whatever, and that's really dangerous. Like there's ways to, we're just going to put these wipes in the kitchen or the bathroom, and then when you go in there and you have like literally 2 minutes, like clean up, like basically trying to push more and more of the maintenance into the margins around activities, as opposed to, if you don't have the time to blitz the house or really do the deep cleaning, sometimes you have to develop micro habits and we've been through seasons like that where it's like, if we do order at a very high level, then we're all going to die because we're not able to like actually go in afterwards, and the things just get worse and worse and worse.
That is one of the benefits of, I guess, of having a large, or having more kids and like life happening around the home a lot, is it's almost like this natural accountability. Like you can't let the house go. And so I think that if you're both working and just having a 2-year-old that can't quite contribute yet, that's a really tricky...
Yeah, put that 2-year-old to work.
Yeah.
What are they doing all day?
Come on, right. Just contributing to the mess.
Right.
So, yeah, I agree with Jeremy. Like the micro habits, like putting the dish in the dishwasher every single time, keeping Clorox wipes under the bathroom sink so that you can just do something quick.
Just kind of maybe lower the bar a little bit, and then raise the micro habits. Yeah,
but I also I like to handle things like cleaning and laundry rhythmically, like having that be part of my rhythm, or both of us, whatever it is that fits in that category for us and our kids now. But if you just have a 2-year-old, probably wouldn't qualify for that. But just the idea of like, okay, Mondays I can spend 10 minutes max on anything, and that's going to be cleaning up from dinner. Right. Or maybe it's like, okay, I have a little more time on Tuesdays, so maybe that will be the night that I can also tackle a bathroom or something like that. Or laundry is the day when I'm at home, like on the weekend, because I need to be switching the loads, but then once a week, laundry is done. Grocery shopping is a particular day of the week, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, like when you know that you have more to do than you have time, you have to time bound everything that you do, so that you can't say, I'm going to keep cleaning the bathrooms until they're done. Like you might say, I got 15 minutes to clean the bathrooms. Like you have to time bound it. And another way to do that is to blitz it. Like you could make a deal with your husband and say, hey, look, things are kind of getting out of control. So every Friday, as soon as you get home from work, we're going to spend 30 minutes cleaning, and that's it, 30 minutes, and we're going to see how much we can get done. And just blitz the heck out of the house. And again, you get as much of the surface stuff done as you possibly can. Part of this and a lot of these struggles, as you guys are going through these crazy seasons where people are working 2 jobs and stuff, I keep thinking about like, what a bummer that we don't live in a more multi-generational way. I think it's actually normal for you when you have some little kids and trying to get out of debt and like starting jobs and husband working 60 hours a week. That's not unusual. What's unusual is that a lot of us don't have the kinds of relationships with parents where there's all the support that comes from that generation. And we tell our kids all the time, look, I expect our kids to go through those kinds of seasons. I just really I hope me and April can be there so that they don't burn out during those seasons. I mean, those are hard seasons, and they come and they're inevitable. Okay. Let's see. Jessica, she wrote, our breakdown for the month is simply putting our clothes in the dirty and not leaving clothes everywhere. Through the primer and activation guide, we discovered that not doing this creates more work and stress for me as the primary laundry washer. You're also the primary one.
Yeah.
She's got all of our kids doing laundry too. Oh, look, Lisa's doing laundry while she's listening. but also the fact that I am a 1 on the Enneagram, and when something does not have a place or home, it creates more anxiety for me, and just to voice that to my husband was a big win. We have been really focusing on this struggle, and I can see a difference, and it's so encouraging. So thankful for the question worksheets for this month, because prior to this, we never thought to think so intentionally about the challenges and breakdowns in our marriage and family. So that's awesome. Big celebration. I mean, when you think about something as simple as like putting your clothes away, what I love about this is we can make those kinds of challenges seem so small and like, oh, who cares? Like, but if you're going to be married for 50 years, you're going to have a bunch of kids, and these things repeat.
Yeah.
It's like
Stuff
these
like
are
laundry. You got to figure
really
it out.
Big deal. Yeah. Like, it's worth figure out, how do we solve this challenge? This is not working. Mm-hmm. How do we fix it? So I know for a lot of people that seems like really small stuff, but again, it's these small repeating things that accumulate and make your life miserable, or it's when you overcome and create really good solutions or systems to overcome small repeating problems and challenges that makes your life awesome and gives you a level of order that you can actually handle the inevitable chaos that just comes into the family all the time, with all the challenges. So it's good to just figure out those small things, get those repeating things fixed as much as you can, and then you'll have the energy for a lot of the bigger stuff. So yeah. Any last words of whatever?
I don't think so. I just want to encourage you guys to keep fighting the fight, because what you're ultimately doing is you're following the Lord through His plan of family. And don't lose sight of how epic it is to get to be a part of a family. Yeah. And the enemy hates family, and he wants to destroy us, so he's going to go after our families. And I want you guys to feel encouraged to keep fighting. Don't let the enemy win. The Lord has overcome, and we are overcomers, and we can do it. We can roll up our sleeves and tackle these really hard, really difficult questions because of Jesus and what He did on the cross. And that's the only way that we can make it through these really hard times. Not because Jeremy and I are saying something amazing, or because we've finally cracked the code on something. It's because we have a Redeemer. Yeah. And whatever's been messed up in our family history or any of that stuff, God can overcome it all. Yeah. And so we just have to do our part in submitting to His will and allowing ourselves to change and grow and repent and do all that stuff. So don't get caught down or bogged down in the breakdowns in the family. And just be encouraged that we're in this for the long haul. We want to see all of you have your 50th wedding anniversary plus. And so let's just praise the Lord for the good works that He does in and through us.
Amen. Yes. It's worth it, guys. Cool. Awesome. So this is it. We'll see you guys at the theme next month. We're going to kick off a whole new theme. It's going to be awesome about households of faith. In the meantime, face those challenges. And like April said, family's worth it. It's not easy. Barely easy. But it takes a lot of work, and you guys can do it.
Bye.
See ya.